Hi, friends. Foggy Oak Fairy Tales is back, and spooky season is upon us. That means it's time for us to dim the lights, light a few candles, and settle in for a Foggy Oak Scary Tale. A kid-friendly scary story vetted by my daughters to make sure I never make it too scary. This one is based on a real-life farm event from this very month, where a series of late-night awakenings led to quite a surprise. As the leaves begin to turn and the nights get colder, our nights have been disrupted by unseen visitors. For the past several nights, at around 11 p.m., our smallest dog, Finn, would suddenly become alert, jerking to rigid attention, and then stalking to one of the windows looking out on the front porch, with his hackles raised and his body as tense and taut as a stretched violin string. Growls rumbled deep in his chest in warning, and he let out a series of vicious-sounding warning barks that brought our 4 larger dogs running to the window as well. But each time this happened, over many nights, nothing was there. Then things got worse. One night at 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by Finn barreling down the stairs, whining and barking and growling all at once. Our 3 biggest dogs, who had been soundly asleep in our room, woke with a start as well, immediately whining to go out and thundering down the stairs to catch up to Finn. By the time I flailed out of bed and made it downstairs, 4 of our dogs were at the front door, growling, pawing, begging to be let out. I looked outside, but again, saw nothing. We do sometimes get bears here, among other things, and I didn't especially want to let the dogs out, but I saw nothing out front, and when I turned on the floodlights in the backyard, saw nothing there either. I gave in and let them out. They ran around the yard barking and whining for a bit, and then made their way back inside, flopped down on the floor in a pile, and fell immediately back to sleep. This pattern repeated for a few more nights, always at 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., and always without seeing or hearing anything that could have set the dogs off. I began to get a little worried. Was it a bear that somehow was continually evading my notice? Another animal? Or something else entirely? Could it actually be a ghost messing with us during spooky season? The next night, after the now standard 11 p.m. false alarm, at 3 a.m., we heard a crashing noise outside that set every dog off at once. I ran downstairs to see what had happened, but by the time I made it outside, there was no sign of any disturbance at all. Nothing was knocked over. Nothing was amiss. And whatever had caused the crash was no longer making any noise at all. Had I imagined it? It didn't seem like it. The dogs were frantic with the desire to get outside and do a patrol, but why was there no evidence of the source of the noise? I stepped back as I opened the door to let the dogs out so they wouldn't push me down in their haste, and they ran into the backyard barking and whining and kicking up a terrible ruckus. But as I had come to expect, there was nothing. All remained quiet and still, aside from the baying pack of dogs, that is. I waited for the dogs to come to the same conclusion, and then trudged with them back up to bed, telling myself that this time it must have been the wind. It must have been the wind, right? The morning dawned bright and clear, and neither I nor anyone else noticed anything amiss as we fed the cats, let out the chickens, and otherwise checked on all the animals as we began the day. After breakfast, David and the kids went off to school and work, and I settled down at my computer to get started on my own job. I put the noises of the night and my increasing concerns of a trickster ghost out of my mind. Around midday, I took a break, and I noticed the recycling was really piling up by the sink. I decided I'd go out to the garage to fetch the recycling bin so I could deal with that growing mass of empty cans. I went out the front door to the garage, walking down the garage steps to snag the tall, bright red recycling bin at the foot of the stairs. I grabbed the bin as usual with one hand and turned to go back up the steps when I noticed it felt heavier than usual. I thought it was empty. It should have been empty, but I couldn't see in the dim light of the garage. I grasped the bin in both hands instead and walked up the garage steps and out into the sunlight. I set the bin down to reach for the front door of the house. I extended my hand to grasp the knob of the front door. As I did so, my gaze was drawn downward into the mysteriously heavy bin. 3 feet down, at the bottom, I saw something squirming, something writhing. My brain took in claws and fur and some kind of scaly, dead-looking tail. Recycling does not squirm. Recycling does not have claws and fur and a scaly, terrible tail. I let out a completely involuntary, "Oh!" and leapt away from the bin like it was on fire, my heart skittering in my chest. It hadn't been a ghost at all, but some kind of unnatural horror come to terrorize us in the night, and now, apparently, in the daytime in my recycling. Or maybe. I took a deep breath and steeled myself. I crept back to the bin and looked down into the equally shocked eyes of an adolescent possum. I cackled, almost as loudly as I had shrieked moments before. Not an unnatural horror at all, just a plain, bog-standard possum in the recycling. The source of the commotion in the night was now clear, and perhaps should have been clear from the beginning. We had a young possum learning to be on its own who had been visiting us. Last night, the possum had, apparently, decided to check out the recycling bin. It fell in, and the walls of the bin were too tall and smooth for it to get out. Mystery solved. No ghost at all. I took the bin to the woods near the barn and carefully tilted it on its side so the possum could get out. It took some coaxing from me, but eventually it dashed out and ran back towards the barn, disappearing around a wall. I haven't seen it in the days since, and I assume it's sticking close to the barn and the woods. I don't think either of us will forget our mutual October surprise anytime soon. And if I hear another round of banging and clanging in the night, I guess I'll know where to check first. The end. I hope this found all of you well and looking forward to a fun Halloween. Thank you so much for listening. Stay tuned for another Foggy Oak Scary Tale coming soon.
P.S. From one of Claire's kids, sometimes it is too scary, and we always think of others. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it.